Good evening. I'd like to call to order the budget meeting for June 2nd, 2021. We have a full committee here tonight. The mayor will not be in attendance, however. And I would like to start a meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all stand. Thank you. This meeting is being televised and we are open to the public. And with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Vidala for some budget updates.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. So we've been spending quite a bit of time on the budget, and I think first I'd like to provide just a little bit of an overview and a recap of how we got here tonight and some of the adjustments that were made since the last meeting. So I think it's important when we talk about the budget, we talk about how the budget is funded and how some of the money works. So in general, we receive money from the state, which is under the Chapter 70 funding, and we also receive money through a city allocation. There's a municipal contribution, and we're fortunate enough in Peabody that the city provides a little bit of money above and beyond. In FY20 budget, last year's budget, it was about $2.5 million, and this year it's a little bit more, but still in that $2.5 and change million. And that's very generous considering that we're in a pandemic and we are coming out of it, which is very nice. However, over the past year, the revenue for the city has certainly been a challenge. And we're fortunate that we've been able to be creative with some of the federal stimulus money, and we've been able to utilize some of those grants and incorporate them into our budget. One thing that I had mentioned last year and a couple times throughout the school year, but I do think it's worth mentioning as well, is that we received a large grant last year called the Coronavirus Relief Grant, and this was separate from the money we talk about ESSER, which was the emergency relief. There was an additional funding mechanism. We got about $1.2 million. Many districts used that money to buy important PPE and supplies and whatnot. And one of the things that the city did is, this was actually really good forethought on the city's part, is they purchased in bulk all the PPE for all the city's departments, including the schools. Many municipalities left the schools out because they had gotten that allocation. What that allowed us to do is the city's generosity and buying in bulk and getting a great deal on the supplies allowed us to purchase $1.2 million worth of technology, and that's how we did the one-to-one Chromebooks for K-5, which wasn't previously done in Peabody. So, that money is really a huge savings to the budget and is a benefit for the students. So as we move forward to this year, the process we used to start the budget was, really to take a look at how are we going to address the kids as we come back. Our plan is to return to full in-person learning when we return in the fall. We know that there's going to be social emotional needs. We know that there's going to be academic loss and learning loss, and we want to make sure that we're addressing all of that. So we put together a budget based on what we thought would be able to address all those needs, and the total budget was $80.6 million. That was the first budget that we presented 2 weeks ago. And then last week, we identified the funding sources, which was a portion from Chapter 70 and then a portion from the city, which added up to $76.6 million and for a difference of $4 million. That $4 million comes from federal stimulus money and grants that were guaranteed over the next 3 years. And so this really allows us to plan long-term and make sure that we are able to really address all the needs of our students and make sure that we are putting forth what we can in the next 3 years. And then we understand that the budget formula will change, the city will increase their revenue, and we anticipate that over that 3-year period, we'll be able to come out of this in a really good place. So at the last meeting, we identified where the $4 million would go, and then we presented this $76.6 million budget, which will ultimately go to the school committee for vote and then to the city council. That's the number of the state funding and the city funding that needs to be voted for the appropriated budget. In addition to that, one thing that we didn't mention that we did start to talk about in conversations, and it is, again, worth bringing to the table, is the city so we get state funding and federal funding for coronavirus relief. So FEMA provided municipalities with a number of grant opportunities and additional funding sources to respond to the pandemic in real time. So we received some money there as a city, as well as money through what was called the CARES Act. That was money that was gone to the city side. And so important infrastructure things have gone into, which would typically maybe go in the budget if we didn't work so closely with the city, but we were able to purchase really important technology and other devices, upgrading security, camera systems, door lock, access entry points. So we have all of these things that are able to be paid out of this federal grant that would not go into this budget. So we're really addressing a lot of the needs as we move forward. Some of the technology things that we're really excited about is during the Welch School building project, they talked about what sort of technology do you need in the classroom. And so here at the Higgins, and this is a brand new building, we have smart boards, which are mounted to the wall. And they are, they were state-of-the-art. The new version of that is called a Promethean interactive board. They come on wheels, and they're adjustable height. They're 70 inches long, and the kids can cast their screen from their Chromebook right onto the screen, and they can show their work, or they can show what they're doing, and it's really impressive. So we had one come to the Burke School and one come to the Welch School and really see what we're able to do. So with that, that's going to be incorporated into the Welch School building project. We thought this would be such a great tool for all of our students, and it addresses some of the COVID opportunities that we have. So we're ordering 100 Promethean smart boards to get one in every grade across all the schools for next year. They'll be on wheels, they'll be able to move. So a lot of that technology is not found in here, but through the great work of Chris Mitchell, our IT director, and partnering with the city, we're able to really do a lot of things to enhance our academic programs. I know a lot of those things you were talking about, what happens if this were to happen again, will we be ready? So we're able to do that. We're able to upgrade our staff devices through these funding sources so that if we did have to do more remote, our staff have better and upgraded devices. Our kids have better access if there needs to be not necessarily a Zoom room, but if we are able to have that Promethean smartboard where it has that ability to cast. So a lot of that is, we have that through our IT budget, has been funded for through these grants and is not in this budget. So again, a huge thank you to the city and just working closely with us to be creative in order to make sure that the money that they are able to allocate is going to the people and the supplies that we really need to open the schools. So that's a long description of sort of how we got to this number. In front of the committee, we have a one-pager which highlights the differences from the draft version 2 budget that you had last week into the draft version 3 budget. So the total budget that we're ready to present is $76,644,085. And so one of the things that we had talked about at the last meeting was really ensuring that the high school, because there's a lot of need there, especially with the older kids, as they come back to full in-person learning, to make sure we're addressing the learning loss. And so there was a question around 2 positions, science and social studies, and there was a desire to have 2 positions returned to the budget. So on Friday, Mr. Magno met with Mr. Quist, the guidance director, and the department heads, and they really went through all the course selection and made sure that all of the course offerings that we had were there. And they did identify that we were appropriately staffed in science and history. However, if they were fortunate enough to get 2 positions into the budget, they would love to see addressing mathematics and English. And when we go to that budget, you'll see that those 2 areas had less teachers than history and science. So we're looking to bring those core academic more in line with the other 2 major subjects. So we were looking to really increase those. And then as we think about some of the other things that we had talked about in talking to Mr. Busey here, he said something that would really be helpful. We think about school security and how much the Higgins is used at night and other. They only have 1 building access attendant. And he thought, wouldn't it be great to really, almost get a twofer? Address school security, but also address some of the linguistic challenges that we have with some of our families, making sure that we are addressing that. If we could get a bilingual building access attendant, that would really serve the Higgins well. So you'll see in the middle of the page, there's 3 added positions. Building access attendant for $22,908, and 2 teachers, they'd be new positions, so we're budgeting in the middle of the road around $65,000. So in order to fund those positions within the constraints of our $76.6 million budget, we really teased through some of the line items that we had in other areas. We had a few of retirements that were able to replace a high with a low, so high, high out, low in, and be able to do that. So there was an ELL salary that was reduced in the center location. We did notice that there was an error in the principal office line at the south, so we adjusted that. That was an addition of $10,000. That wasn't just for one salary, though. There was a reduction in the kindergarten position, which was a retirement, and so you'll see that's a reduction from a high salary to more of an entry-level salary. The same thing with a special education salary, a big salary dropping down to a lower number. And then as we skip down to the bottom, there were 2 retirees as well at the high school level where we took that high salary and adjusted it down to be a new hire. And then there were some reductions and additions actually in the district office. We found that in one line, 22023, that line looked like it was being reduced, and it shouldn't have been. It should have been level funded. So we had to adjust that and reduce another line, 22026, to get to that increase of $15,000. So overall, the net change from the last budget that you saw is about $29,000, and we're pretty confident that this 76.644085 number is accurate and can address the needs of our students. So I did a lot of talking. I'll now turn it back to Ms. Carpenter for questions and comments.
Thank you, Dr. Vidala. That was very informative. I appreciate your explanation. And I guess we'll get right into it and open it up and start. Mr. Olympio, you want to begin?
Thank you, Dr. Vidala, and thank you for your team for putting this together, and very comprehensive and a lot of work put into it. So I just have a handful of small questions. I figure we can just go item by item, and you'll be probably done with me. Tab 16. Just a question, tab 16, line 16013. It's the dues and fees in athletics. I just saw a dramatic decrease in dues and fees. What
Yeah,
is the
so,
explanation?
So what we found is that that chart of accounts was very different. So you'll see that that line item is level funded at the top. So what they were paying for is out of that account, they had budgeted under dues and fees was really contracted services. And so all we did is, if you look at the bottom line, it was really
Right.
a level fund there.
Okay,
It's
so
just
shifting.
It's just
within-
moving things
okay.
into the right chart of accounts. So as we looked at it, they were budgeting one thing under dues and fees, but it was really, they were considering it a fee, but it was really a contracted service. And so to make it in line with what the DESI chart of accounts are, we just moved that number, it's the exact same number, up to that line of 16010.
Okay. Tab 17, in line 17025, under special education, contracted services, there's a decrease of 100K?
Yes, that was moved to the grants.
Okay.
Yep.
Move to the grants, okay. Let's see, then I had,
And another, and I just
yep,
thinking about that, some of that money was paid to school psychologists that we had to outsource to as a contract, but we're hiring 3 school psychologists
Okay,
within
so
the
that's-
budget. So that helps to decrease that as well. But we do feel like we can pay for all of that through the grants.
okay. And then line 17033, just a little explanation, just a rationale for the increase, I can imagine. You
Yep.
explain.
So last year, so these are actual numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, these things were paid either out of the grant, or we had last year identified that the FY19 grant was underspent, and we took like $600,000 and paid upfront pre-tuition. So we got that money off for last year, but now we have to incorporate it into the budget. And so we really tried to make sure that these were accurate numbers, and that they were reflected to the right degree. So we're utilizing more students going to the collaboratives, which is a good thing. That's the one that we're the member of. So, North Shore Consortium. And so we do get a better rate for our students when they go to the collaborative, and the collaborative can offer more services, it's close by. So you do see an increase really across the board in special ed tuitions, but that's just a reflection of, previously how they were paid
Okay,
by buying ahead, and we weren't able to do that this year.
okay. All right, then tab 22. Let's see. It was, so 22033, the contracted services. It was about 66,000, same as last year, but I'm a little confused with one of the line items was superintendent mentor for 40,000. It was 22033.
22032. So I do not have a $40,000 mentor, I can tell you that.
Right, so that's, I'm just thinking, is it just something that maybe we could pick up? If you
Yeah,
look
I'm
at
not
the
sure if that was carried over.
Yeah, if you look at the detail on 25B, page 25B, that's part of that line, so I didn't think you did.
No, I certainly don't. Mr. Scanlon, do you know what we've paid out of that account by any chance? So 22,033. So I know we were looking to level fund contracted services. Okay.
So I'm just thinking, there's an opportunity for some money to be moved elsewhere.
So I know I do attend the new super's induction program. I
Right,
don't know
and
if
I
it's
saw
that.
that. I saw
Yeah,
that.
I don't believe that's that cost.
Combination of things, it's the arbitration services, employee assistance program, leadership institute, mentoring programs, and end-of-year report audit.
Okay, that makes up that 40,000?
Well, it's a budget plan. Obviously, whether or not we need those services every year, I think it's something that, it's what the anticipation is. I'd have to take a look at what our actual expenses.
Yeah, I would just
Yeah.
think that we would want to,
So probably the title of that line is not an accurate reflection of
Okay, right, and
of what we're spending on.
right, and if it's something that we need, that's fine. But if it's just something that's carried over,
Right.
all I'm just saying is, $40,000
Is
is
it-
a lot, we could use
Capture
that
that money
elsewhere.
somewhere.
So, that's just
Yep.
what I'm getting at. I mean, certainly if it's something, you could maybe follow up with us.
Yeah, we'll make a note of that and come back.
Yeah. Then, let's see. Yeah, and I would just say probably in general, just review that account because it says other contracts, $10,000. Again, there's an opportunity for $40,000, $50,000 to be allocated elsewhere potentially, if it's not needed.
Yeah, and we can look at, as we do the end-of-the-year reports, so we have a burn
Yep.
report of how much is spent out of each account, and we can make sure. In general, the ordinaries, we felt as though level funding was appropriate this year, but we'll take a look at exactly what was spent out of that account line.
Then I saw somewhere, and I don't have the exact page number, but, it's grant funded, but it was just more of, for my information, what is an educational stability liaison?
Yes, so it's a required position, and it's for students who might be in flux. So students in foster care, students with McKinney-Vento, homeless students. And so they oversee all of that and coordinate the transportation, coordinate anything with DCF, whatever their housing might be, and making sure they're connecting them to services outside. So it is a required position. We were looking to move that into the attendance office and have that person do more outreach within the attendance. So right now, that's a position that is actually funded here at the Higgins, half-time doing that, half-time doing school adjustment counselor. So we want a full-time school adjustment counselor here to provide more in-person support, and then take that half-time and have them work with in the attendance office.
Okay. No, thank you. I'll yield for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mr. Amico?
Thank you. Through the chair, Dr. Vidala, Dr. Lord, Business Manager Scanlon, thank you so much, their whole team. This is great. Ms. Dunn was right last week. This is a great budget. And with that said, I appreciate all that you guys have done and the whole team. But I too want to look at a few items. And, I was thinking back during this whole COVID time, and the individuals who were hurt the most by COVID were our kids. Let's face it, they didn't have instruction like they normally did, although I think our staff and our schools did an incredible job. They didn't have the sports, they didn't have the performing arts. So I'm gonna plead to the school committee here tonight that if we do find any monies in this budget that we think we can move, I'm gonna suggest 3. The first one was the After Dark program that we talked about last week. As many of you know, my father was a local 22 laborer for many, many years. He provided for a whole family, sent 3 kids to college, paid for it, passed away last year, and has left an incredible legacy as working as a laborer. Anytime I went to meet up with him to help him do any kind of yard work or construction work, he would send me away and say, go read a book. That's what he would say. He was proud of what he did. He was great at what he did. And I did mention last week that with all the jobs programs out there coming out with the funding through the federal government, there are going to be a lot of jobs for kids who are in that in between. I don't want to go to college, but I don't want to go to a technical school. But you know what? I'm good at building things. I'm good at laying bricks. I'm good at concrete work. I love working a jackhammer. And for those kids, that's a great way to make a living, and people can make a lot of money. So I'd love to reallocate some monies into that program. So I'm going to plead to the school committee, if we do find any money, let's put some money in that program, because I think it has some value. Secondly, athletics. Our kids were really hurt. I know my own kids were hurt by it. Nothing replaces the camaraderie with your teammates, your coaches, getting ready for games, practices, and obviously competing in those events as well. So I'd like to move into, and I know Mr. Hockman had mentioned uniforms and such that need an upgrade. I'd love to move some money into those programs. And then thirdly, one of the things that we missed as school committee people is going to all those performances. I said this, and I think we all said this a couple of years ago when people were challenging our test scores on MCAS. Peabody's 1 strike away from a level 4. And we all, to a man, to a woman, we all said, well, walk through that building, go to an event, go to a performance arts, go see the chorale, go to a drama performance. Tell me if you think that's a level 3 or a level school, okay? So I'd love to reallocate some monies into Mr. Simmons' group and other groups down there, because, we're the adults. We made it through COVID. We struggled, but you know what? The kids really struggled. So if we're gonna do the right thing, if we're gonna put the hope word up there, if we're gonna do the every student every day, let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's put some extra money towards our kids. I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. On that point, Dr. Vidal, I know we talked a lot about the After Dark program. Do you have a figure that we would need to reinstate that?
I do not have a number. I know we were talking about really exploring other opportunities for our kids and making sure that we really give them the access. One thing I could put out to the committee, I know that last summer, for example, after the budget was voted, we did have some high-in, low-out, and we came to you asking for new positions and things like that. So there will certainly be some money, this is a snapshot in time. So there will be certainly, I will be coming to you, as the summer comes and saying, we have some money in a salary line, like to have the school committee vote to move it to a certain line. And I think, these are very credible areas that we could address. Within what we did, we met with Mr. Simmons, we met with Mr. Bua, we've met with Mrs. Ferry, and really just trying to make sure that everybody's budget is funded to really address all the kids. And, I think this budget does that, and I'm certainly willing to, as things come up, bring them back to the committee and, really, and I know we did a great job of that last summer, really being able to bring in some new positions. So this is a snapshot in time. This is within, the money that the city has given us. I do think that we address it, but we also do find ways to write some grants over the summer and into the next school year, as well as identify additional funds as, somebody retires, somebody resigns, we hire somebody else. So there is an opportunity within once the budget is appropriated to make some moves and really to enhance some of these programs. And if there are specific things, I know Mr. Amico mentioned uniforms, and we did have a discussion around getting every team on a 3-year plan, so that every 3 years the varsity teams would be purchasing new uniforms, and then 3 years later, they would be handing those down to the sub-varsity teams, and no one in Peabody would be wearing a uniform that is more than 6 years old. And so I think we have some plans for that we can incorporate within the current funding that we have. However, I do want to make sure that we're addressing these additional needs. And so if there are specific things, we certainly can find ways to fund them and make sure that we're really putting forth the best program that we can for the kids holistically, not just academics, but really all the wraparound services as well.
Thank you, Dr. Vidala. Would you like to follow up, Mr. Amico?
Through the chair. So I'd like to go through a couple items that I pulled out. Actually, one of them is funny. I think the public needs to know, not for my sake, but for the value that they are getting with this school committee. The 6 individuals here, I'm going to leave myself out of it, but we know this, and some people know this. But our salary for school committee is budgeted for $30,600, and that's for all 6. That is a decrease of 1.9% or $600. So I'm just going to throw it out there. What did we do to deserve a pay cut?
No, sorry, what that was when I first got here, I had anticipated an increase, 2%, on a lot of the salary lines.
Yeah.
So that is a budget that was entered. So that budget actually is entered, but you ain't getting it.
Okay. And again, I'm just throwing it out there. I hope the public knows that the value they are getting with these incredible people that I call colleagues. You guys are awesome, and you're worth every penny of that, trust me. All right, let's get back to business. So, and thank you, through the chair, thank you, Dr. Vidala. Again, those are the 3 things that really, there was a lot of rain this weekend, and I had a lot of thinking. I mean, Mother Nature really messed things up. And for a superintendent, that's probably the worst thing, to hand us these books and have it rain for 4 straight days. So I do want to make a couple of cuts, and again, this has no bearing on the incredible work that central office has done, that superintendent, assistant superintendent has done. Again, this is more for me to say, what can we do more for our kids? And I just, I do see some wiggle room, and this school committee has shown a propensity in the past that if the superintendent ever needs any money, we'll find some money down the road, and I think the mayor has done that as well. So I'm okay with making a few minor adjustments, moving some monies to those 3 different programs to know that they will be there for those 3 programs. And then if anything else comes up, come before us, and we would be glad, within reason, we would be glad to add dollars, because we do have some money, and hopefully more of this ESSER money is coming, and those checks are real, which I think they are. But I'd like to make a couple adjustments, just minor, just things that I think could help our kids. And I want the headlines tomorrow to say, hey, Peabody School Committee adds more funding for kids for sports and athletics and job programs and performing arts. I think that's what we do best. We educate our kids, but that's where our kids really, really thrive and become great leaders. And those of you who've gone through Peabody Public Schools, The mayor's not here, and he's not applying for the Celtics position. That's open, so we'll throw that rumor out there. But I'd like to move a couple line items, smaller line items, and let's see if we can move them to any of those three. One of the things I looked at is contracted services, and I did see that line item for $40,000, as Mr. Olympio saw. I'd like to take at least $10,000 of that and divide it through those three programs. And I think it was line item 22032. 33, excuse me. And if we can allocate $10,000 from there and divide it up through those three programs.
Mr. Amico, can I ask if you have any specific things that you would like to see added in those areas?
Sure, and
I just
athletics-
want to make sure that we're
Sure.
not taking away something that is a contract that we currently have that we're responsible for.
Sure.
And if there's something specific we need to purchase, I'm willing to find the money for it, but just to throw extra money into a line item that's not allocated, I'm not sure that.
Sure.
I just want to make sure we're doing this.
Through the chair to Dr. Vidala, and Mr. Hockman said this last week, and you know, social media is great, and sometimes it's not great, but I saw a picture on Facebook. It was one of our baseball players, and he was running or had just stolen a base, and he's in his Peabody gear, Peabody shirt. He's got his elbow pads. He looked like a professional ball player. He looked great. And then I look at his helmet, and his helmet has a different letter on his helmet. He's wearing an AAU helmet. He's not wearing a Peabody Tanner's helmet. And I'm sure he's probably doing it for comfort, but regardless of that fact, I want every athlete that represents us, because they're student athletes, they're some of our leaders, I want them to be proudly in our gear, not someone else's. And I think that's happened in other places as well. But I find that to be a very valid reason to fully fund, there's a reason why he's wearing that helmet and not the issued one from Peabody. So whatever that is, I want him to wear one that has a P on it, or the bull. So I know that sounds small, but when we're in a recruiting area where we are, I mean, kids have options. And every student we get from another school is a student we need. And I don't think kids in other schools are wearing someone else's helmet when they're running from first to third. And I know that might sound minute, but to parents, to boosters, to the community, to me, that sounds like, you know what? School committee, get your act together. That kid should be wearing a Peabody Tanner's helmet. And no offense to that kid. I know the kid personally. He's fantastic, and his family's fantastic, but I want to be able to provide for them. That's what we do.
Yeah, actually, point of information, the three lawyers sitting here all went through our head. That's a liability issue, too. If they're not wearing the equipment that we provide, it's different with uniforms, but helmets, bats, things like that, that can be a liability issue. So it is really important. I know you're looking at the I don't mean to say what would you call it, the logo, the fashion aspect.
Sure.
Think of a better word for that one, but you guys know what I mean. That's a liability issue too, so I'm glad you brought that up.
All right. So that's just something that I thought of. Again, it may not be a big issue. It may be cosmetic, but some of the other things that I was looking at was 22035, central advertising. I don't know what that is through the chair.
Yep, that is the firm that we use. So that was in place last year, and the adjustment is the firm that we use that helps with the press releases, and so it's the advertising firm that we use. JG Guilfoyle.
Again, through the chair, I look at it and say, yeah, it's only $5,000, but
So when we think about recruiting and things like this is our opportunity to really get good press for the kids. And so that was something that we incorporated this year to really try to publicize the school a little bit better, to get things in there. It was a huge help this year, and, you know, it's something that I would like to continue and to really provide that spotlight and that coverage on our students as best as we can.
I know it's only $5,000. I don't, personally, I'm not a big fan of the optics. We are a public school. You know, we are increasing our central office budget by at least one staff member. Again, it's only $5,000, and I know we talked about this last week, about little items, but, you know, these little items are gonna start adding up. But if that's something that we really need,
They also provide crisis support and things like that. It is something that I do think, so that is one line item I do think that is important for our students and important for us moving forward.
all right, then I guess I'll go with, I have one other, and I remember this, because we did have a couple of members that were sort of apprehensive about it, and I was supportive of it, but now that I look at it, and as a school committee member here, I'm very fortunate. We do have 3 attorneys here, and we do have our chair who's not here, who's also an attorney, and we do have city solicitors who we utilize. So I do believe we have contracted a legal firm for the school committee, and at this point, I don't think that's monies that we really need at this point being allocated there. So I would move to make that cut and move that to one of those 3 line items. I think it's,
And Mr. Miko, I apologize, I keep responding in the way that I do. We have found that has been an incredible support to the city solicitor's office in a number of our more timely personnel issues that we've had. You will notice that we asked for 25 last year, and there was a reduction. You know, we did not use that money, and so we're looking to reduce it, and we'll continue to you know, make sure that we have, you know, a small pocket in there just to address the things as the city solicitor gets busy and can't handle things. There are some things school-specific that it is nice to have the firm. They've been very timely, and they've really worked on a number of things for us that have been helpful to the city solicitor's office and to central office. You know, if you'd like to reduce it, maybe even another 5 to like 10,000 total, you know, I think that we could maybe take that 5 and slide it to one of those line items that you were discussing. I think that would be an appropriate move.
I think that's fair, Dr. Vidal, I appreciate that. And I believe we had talked about, it's really a draw, right, when you use them, so that, I would. So I'll make that, I'll meet you halfway there, and that, I think it's a great, I agree, it is good to have if we need it, but I'd love that $5,000 moved over to either one of those three programs. So I'll make that in a form of a motion to move $5,000 from the legal services to, do I have to give a line item to move it to, or can we just?
You can do a reduction of 5,000.
So I'll just do a reduction of 5,000 from legal services.
Second.
Mr. Omiko made the motion, Mr. Hockman seconded. Any discussion on the motion for the reduction of $5,000 in the legal services that we contracted out? With no discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes,
Ms. Griffin-Dunn?
Yes.
And Mr. Onotis?
Yes.
the motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Omiko, you still have the floor.
Could I make one point, though, just for the record? The attorneys who serve as elected officials are not allowed to give legal advice to the school committee, just so everyone knows that, but we know when to contact a lawyer.
I think you just gave us legal advice, Mrs. Dunn.
Yeah, thank you.
This was the fine print at the bottom of the meeting.
Thank you. That's the value of being on the school committee. We've got all these great minds around us. And the other one is just a comment, and I know it's been talked about. The lease of our building at central office, I think it's a great building. I totally agree with where it is. It's downtown. It fits there. It should be there. I'm just asking, and I did speak to the mayor privately, that maybe in our next lease, commercial real estate is plenty available from what I'm hearing. I'd like to see that number just go down a little bit, and that'll help us in the future. But I do love the location. I do love the building, and it belongs there. But I'd like to pay a little bit less, a little bit more value. I will yield. Sorry for the long-winded.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mr. Arnottis?
Thank you. Mr. Amico, you hit some great points there. You're reading my mind on some of this. I think it's a good
That's
balance.
scary for you.
Yeah.
Through the chair.
Well, I was going to say, we're a steal at 30 grand, I think, the six of us. Can't beat that. But I want to thank you for putting together this budget. I do have some questions myself, and thank you for answering many of the ones that we've thrown at you, throughout this process. I am happy to hear that it sounds like things are getting worked out primarily at the high school. I think there has been a little bubbling up of concern that there were going to be some drawbacks in our offerings up there. And I would never want to see that, specifically with some of the more notable options, from mock trial to some of the other offerings we have up there. I think there would be a pretty big backlash if mock trial was eliminated from our options up there. So that's probably a good thing.
Absolutely,
that that's not
and we have no
happening.
intention of eliminating mock trial.
I think you'd have more lawyers here than you might have now after that.
Exactly. And so, it is solely based on the student request forms. And so we want to make sure that, when kids request classes, we make sure we offer them. And so, I know mock trial was requested, at least 3 sections of it, I believe, will be offered next year to make sure that all those kids get it that asked.
That's great. And then I know there's a reduction, and you had mentioned it when we were chatting, in the business line item in there. So just so people are aware, we're still offering college prep courses. Those offerings are going to be out there for people.
Yes, and that reflection was actually something that was done last summer. So it was a retiree that went out, so there were 5 previously, and then it ended up being the credit recovery. We eliminated a suspension teacher, and that position was then taken over as a credit recovery, and and you see the number of students who are graduating this year, 360. So it definitely was a lot of bang for the buck, and so that's where that reduction comes from. There's an additional retirement, again, in that same department, which will be filled. I know they're looking at offerings like financial literacy and a number of courses like that. But the things that they do, the College Works and other things like that, that's still, and we still have a partnership with Leap for Education. So a lot of the college planning and things like that will still be offered through the business department.
Great. And shifting to some of the points that Mr. Amico mentioned, I was curious because I did notice it in the athletic line items for equipment. There is an increase in there right now. Is that money we could use towards some of these, or is that dedicated in other ways? Is there an option there just to try to get to some of these uniform issues that we are having and equipment issues?
Yes, and we also have the revolving account funds that have not really been tapped into, and some capital expenses. So there are absolutely line items that we can identify and make sure that we have uniforms that are truly uniform for everyone, because I think that is something that, I've talked to Mr. Hockman and Mr. Miko has mentioned about making sure the kids, are outfitted appropriately, and they should look professional out there. They should look, fully uniform and making sure that our kids have the best that we can offer. And so I do think that we can address a lot of the uniform issues moving forward.
Okay, great. Now, my question with the ESSER money, basically, what are our limitations on the use of that? Because I think I spoke my piece with the After Dark program 2 weeks ago. I think we should have that program. I was just talking to someone the other day, basically in the labor movement about this, and they're thrilled because you're going to see a massive infrastructure plan come from the federal government, and there's going to be jobs upon jobs ready for people. And I think we should allow our students to have that option to take that route if we want to, but make a contribution here. Give that availability to them if we can. So I don't think we're probably haggling here over a ton of money. I mean, what is it, a bus, basically? Was that the cost to participate in this program for half a day? Because we shared the bus, right? So, I mean, we're really, I can't imagine it's a lot of money that we really need to institute here to get this program maintained, at least for
Yeah,
another year.
I can definitely look into, what it would take to be able to have some of those offerings for the kids. And I think ultimately, as we mentioned, not to beat a dead horse, that we really want to make sure that our kids are getting the opportunities that they need and deserve, and, sort of making sure that we find the root to the problem as opposed to putting a different solution on the problem. So if the root to the problem is 8th grade admissions, we need to start to address 8th grade admissions. And if that's the problem, if that's truly the problem, that these kids wanted to go there and couldn't get in, we can address that first in the 8th grade admissions process, but secondarily in the transfer process, to make sure that those kids have that opportunity to attend that school and have access to those programs. And just to make sure that, is this the best fit? Or was this a Band-Aid that we did because of these other things that we couldn't do? And if we can fix those things previously, we might be able to give kids even a more robust opportunity. So that's really what I want to do, is peel back and give the kids the best opportunity that they can have.
And I agree with that. I do think that's the right plan, and I know you had told us recently that you're working on an agreement, I believe, with Essex Tech. I mean, my concern is, what do we do in the meantime while we're trying to come up with, a solid something, or maybe not a solid, but something else, because I do think the After Dark program does have opportunity. Whether it has opportunity here, maybe we need to explore that a little bit. If it doesn't, so be it. But my question is, all right, what are we going to do in that gap time, basically? Right. And I don't expect you to have
And although it's
answers
not
tonight.
funded,
I know
right, and although it's not funded next year, we are sending the kids who are currently enrolled in the program next year. We're going to do that again. And then any kid that had expressed interest in, and we can open it up again, we're looking through that transfer process. So that was sort of our interim plan, is to allow the current juniors who are rising seniors to continue to participate in that program for next year, and then anyone who expressed interest. So one of the students that did express interest, as we dug in, is actually a current 9th grader and wouldn't have been eligible for the junior class next year. However, we are working with that family to make sure that student has opportunity he wouldn't have had from After Dark because of the way the program was designed, but is going to have access next year, through that process of working with Essex North Shore Tech. So we're really doing everything we can to meet the kids where they are and provide as much opportunity as we can. Okay. So we'll keep looking, and I definitely look to make sure that the kids who want that opportunity have that opportunity.
Great, and that's the most important thing, right? Thank you. Shifting a little bit, I'm curious about the remote academy that Dr. Lord and yourself are working on. Can you talk about a little bit of the funding for that? Because I know some of it, I think the position is the head position, the executive director of remote learning. That's an ESSER money, but the rest of it is school to school. Is that correct?
So if there is enough need, the way that we did it this year was that positions could be absorbed if there's declining enrollment and there was an open position, we would be able to absorb that through. So once we get the total enrollment, we'll identify where the students are coming from. And so, for example, if there were only 40 students at an elementary school that was budgeted previously for 55 students at 3 teachers, and now there's 40, there's a need for 2 teachers, but we have this one position in the budget, we'll be able to fund that. That's what we did this year, and we really take a look at that. If there isn't that availability, we're not going to populate class sizes. That's what we'll use additional ESSER money, and that money is in there for any additional position that we need. So we can address that through, that's a perfect thing to use the ESSER money for. So it won't increase this budget at all. We'll look at it, and we'll be able to report out on how exactly it's funded. But we do feel as though it's going to be budget neutral, and we're not going to affect the appropriated budget at all.
Okay, that's great. Well, my thinking with that was just, all right, we're starting something new. It's another new thing, so you want to make sure it can grow and have those legs. So, don't want any instability there. Well, I'm all set for right now. I'll let someone else jump in, but I'm more than happy to have conversations if we need to go further about athletic equipment and then performing arts as well. I think that's certainly a worthy cause. They deserve it after this ridiculous year. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you. I will follow along with what Mr. Arnottis was saying. I think that the idea that Mr. Amico brought up 3 really good ideas on how to concentrate on, giving back to the kids, and really focusing on them. The uniforms, I definitely agree with. I think that they all should be outfitted. We did have a plan, I don't know when we dropped it, but there was supposed to be something in place on uniforms as far as when we would rotate through, so that every year there were certain teams that would get a new uniform and then it would progress through. I don't remember if it was every 3 years, I think it may have been every 5 years, but I also think it depended upon the sport. But I think it's a great idea to look at, and it really would help a lot of people. And again, make sure that the kids are safe too. You all know I really want to return to the After Dark program, I definitely want to. And I was speaking with the head of Local 22, Mr. Miko. I didn't realize that was the union your dad was in. But I think your dad would be amazed to hear that one of the students who graduated from the After Dark program, went through the apprentice program with Local 22, is now making $2,300 a week. That's opportunity. Right out of high school, that's really good opportunity. I think we should be looking into the program. I think we should figure out, on many levels, how it was affected by, COVID, notification to students. There's a lot of different levels there. And we all know that increasing opportunities in vocational and CTE programs is really important. So I really do want to look at our CTE program to make sure that we are improving and expanding that program so that more and more students are able to receive the benefits of that type of education. The number of students interested in Peabody in vocational education has not changed since the day that we met to begin the discussions about going into the Essex North Shore program, the building, many years ago. And it's never wavered. It's been a consistent 800, even with decreases in our enrollment. So we definitely have to look at that. So if there is some extra money, I think we need to look into putting it into our CTE program as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Scanlon, actually, let me start out with Dr. Vidala. I want to thank you for your time. We spent a little bit of time talking about some of the things that you highlighted at the beginning of tonight's meeting, and I appreciate that, because the money that we're spending for the technology and the safety were some of the concerns I had at our last meeting that I didn't see in this budget. And now knowing that we're receiving the benefit through other grants that came to us and through the generosity of the city, the state, and federal governments. It's good to know, because I think it's important stuff to get our kids. Talk about getting things for kids, and we're all looking for that, and that's a big help there. Having kids back in school full time for a full year, we have to, without really looking at some safety measures as closely as we had in years past, because we were worried about online learning and asynchronous and synchronous. It's good to know that we're upgrading our safety, not only protocols, but hardware and technology within buildings. And then, in addition to that, getting the opportunity to upgrade our technology, which has already been incorporated into education. It was enhanced dramatically and thrust upon us through COVID, and hopefully that technology continues. So I wanted to thank you. We did take some time over a holiday weekend, and I appreciate that. I do have some questions, I think more for an understanding, and I don't know if Dr. Vidala or Mr. Scanlon, I don't know who's better suited to answer, so I'll just throw it out there, and you guys, if we go to tab 21, which is utilities, nothing exciting here. And they're really more general questions, and it may, and I suspect the answer that I think Mr. Scanlon is going to give me, but we don't budget for increases for certain utilities, but we do for others. So, for example, water, electricity at the high school, and field lights, we don't budget for an increase. And I suspect there's either been a surplus in those lines I suspect that that's why we're not budgeting an increase. Is that right?
Yeah, what I've done is, I've worked with Jim Hayfie and, contacted Peabody Municipal Lighting about this budget, because it always struck me as a little bit odd also, because it seems to be the same budget every year. So what the city's done is added solar offsets, net metering credits, so that is enabling us to do. What we've done is we encumber the full amount, and it does appear that this year we'll end up a little bit under budget. So I feel very confident that status quo it's a good budget. We're gonna increase it a little bit, but it's really about the same budget every year.
Thank you, I appreciate that through the chair, and I suspected that. I will just say, and every homeowner in the city, or property owner in the city has realized an increase in water and sewer because of some of the work that's been done and some of the changes that have taken place with that. So I just caution you slightly, just to keep an eye on that line in particular. It's something that we have not experienced in this city historically, but recently in the last year or so, there have been some significant increases. I don't know if, again, there's a cap, that the city puts on the school buildings. I don't know the intricacies of that, but just a little bit of a warning there. In regard to the line 21001, gas and diesel, and again, it's budgeted for the same amount, and that's fine, I'm sure you know. But what do we use gas and diesel for? Is that for our school buses?
Transportation services, we have a split, 60% roughly outsourced and 40%, that we do. So we do have a number of account lines for us to maintain our buses and vans, and then we have account lines to pay other outside services. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but.
It does, and that's what I suspected. Again, I just didn't, Mr. Scanlon, you've done, I think, a fantastic job in moving some lines that were inappropriately placed into other lines that are better placed, and I didn't know if that line, I think all we use gas and diesel for is transportation. I just didn't know if that should be in the transportation tab in budget as opposed to utilities. I don't know, I'm not an accountant, but I thought it was for transportation. I just wanted to make sure that that's what it was for.
Take a look at it. There are minor, actually a lot of them, so there's a lot of minor changes to the account structure. The coding that DESI had put out a couple years ago, we did change a lot of it, but there's still a lot more that needs to be changed. But I wouldn't disagree that the whole transportation, set of accounts, we could revisit all of those and ensure that they line up correctly.
And Mr. Hockman, there may be other equipment, whether it's maintenance equipment or equipment in our schools that use gas or diesel for whatever reason. So that might be why it's not in transportation, but it is something that has historically been under utilities.
Fair enough, fair enough. But while we're there, if we can just flip to tab 20, when we're talking about transportation. And the first question I have, I think, goes to Mr. Scanlon through Madam Chair. And that's line 20,012, contractual regular transportation. And again, I suspect I know the answer, but we're seeing a significant increase for FY22 vis-a-vis FY21. And is that, actually, I don't know that I know the answer to that, because I think in FY20, when COVID first came upon us, we negotiated a reduction because we weren't utilizing buses for 2.5 months. So we negotiated a reduction, I think, saving fuel and some maintenance and things like that. But I suspect in FY21, where we've been in school, where buses have been utilized five days per week, or at least 4 days per week. So anyway, with that, can you just give me a little insight as to why we see that type of increase this year?
The statement that you provided is accurate. At the end of 20 is when COVID first started, so we did reduce payments. We actually paid the transportation services, even though they weren't providing the service. I'm sure you remember that. 21, we knew that we were going to be taking discounts, so that's why the budget was lower in 21. So it's lower this year, but a portion of it is also being charged to FEMA grants. Any additional scheduling required because of COVID, those are being charged to the grant. So next year, we're going back to the bid price, assuming it's going to be a normal year, normal number of buses, same number of routes.
So what I hear you saying is if this budget looked back a few more years, the number that we're seeing for FY '22 would be consistent with those numbers. Is that fair? We didn't change a contract, we didn't get hit with
No.
any surcharges, or we're paying the contracted
Right.
rate that was negotiated.
The contractor's bid is a 3-year base and then 2 one-year options, and it's the same price every
Okay.
year.
No, that's what I wanted to hear. I just wanted to be sure. I don't want to make any assumptions. And while we're talking about school buses and routes, and I know, and this may be beyond the purview of tonight's meeting, and maybe we take it up next Tuesday, but I know a few months ago, we talked about a transportation audit. And I don't know if that ever was undertaken or where we stand on that. And maybe we just put it on the agenda for next meeting to get an update on that. And then the next line I had a question on in transportation, it probably goes to Dr. Vidala. And that's 2004 with some bus monitors. And I don't know what the FTEs are, and that's not terribly relevant for me, but I'm seeing an increase of about 21, a little over 21%.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm
that
assuming-
reflected people that were not being paid minimum wage, and so we paid them this year and then incorporated into the budget, and I think we had talked about some people who were not getting paid minimum wage, and we made that right. It is, because of the increase, it's a percentage increase, it looks significantly more, but over the course of the number of people, it's really not a lot of dollars. It's just the percentage-wise, and we had talked about that previously with another bargaining unit, when you raise them above the minimum wage and then even, to more of a fair wage, the increase percentage-wise, because they're starting at a lower number, is significant.
Good. And thank you for that, and thank you for being fair and reasonable with our employees as you are. And were there any additional monitors put on? Was that part of it too? I mean,
Yes, part of it is, you'll see, it's a 0.8 increase because a number of them don't work full-time, so they're part-time. So, it might be 2.4s that were additional. So 9.8 represents the FTEs, but not the number of people.
okay. No, thank you. And next, if we can jump to tab 17. I just have a few more. Sorry to keep the, and I think maybe you answered this with Mr. Olympio. Line 17033, the tuition at the collaborative, that's North Shore Consortium.
Yes.
Primarily.
Yep, so if you look back to FY '20,
Yep.
how it was budgeted, and then last year, we took some liberties with paying some things forward, just enabling us to save money. We're pretty much back to where we were. It's just actually a little bit less than FY '20, honestly, but it does look like a big increase, just because of how we paid it the previous year, really exhausting some of those grants.
Great. No, I do see that now. Thank you. And moving backwards to tab 15, to maybe some of Mr. Amico's points, and I agree with most of them. We should be giving money or things back to performing arts and athletics, and helping our student population get back to some greater semblance of normal. Line 1502, I'm assuming that this is just a shift of FTEs, because we're adding 5 from 1.
Yes, those were all reduced from the school budgets and put into, see, these are all the elementary music teachers, the 5 elementary music teachers. So we had one that was the instrument teacher, has always been in there, that does 5th grade instrument and does some of the other instrument classes across the district. So since that was a district position, that was there previously in FY '20 and '21. And what we did is we moved the music teachers into the performing arts, and then below that, you'll see 5 art teachers, the visual arts. So the performing arts is music, and then the 5 visual arts. So that's why you see a pretty significant increase in this budget, and we saw those reductions across each of the school budgets.
Thank you. Tab 13, this is a curriculum and instruction line, or tab, excuse me. And I see I was looking for this, and I see in line 13001, kindergarten director, which was budgeted in FY '20 for 0.5 FTEs, and I think that's because Ms. Murphy had announced her retirement in December, so we only budgeted for half a year, and that was one of the ways that we made the budget work in a not-so-pleasant budget year. So I see that. And I see that you're proposing the addition of a early childhood and kindergarten coordinator for this year's budget, but I couldn't find a line for an early childhood coordinator. And I just was hoping that someone can point me to that, if it's here.
Yes, I believe it was under central office previously. But I could certainly find it for you of where it was.
Right, historically. All right, and we can find that at some point.
Yeah, I can find it and send it to
Point
you.
of information, I believe that you can see that it was Kristen Hutton Fay's position through the McCarthy, so it might be in there.
I did look at the McCarthy, and I didn't see that.
It's under special ed. I just saw it, the reduction in special ed. Mr. Hockman,
Yeah,
I
I
see,
see it.
IEP, the description got changed between the 2 years. It says chairperson.
Yeah, you'll see previously it was budgeted under 170000, and then it says that it was moved to 17001.
No, I thought I saw a line here, but now I don't. Okay, but isn't that a line for Mrs. Chioda?
In a previous budget, there were 2 people under that, and that goes back to probably FY '19. But her name was listed in that supervisory line there for 00.
Yeah.
And so there was the director of special ed, and it said pre-K, director, pre-K, IEP team chairperson.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I see the backup material, and I see...
And then it's moved down all the way to the bottom, right above where it says 17002, and then that salary is listed across.
When I look at the backup in tab 17, I see Ms. Hutton Fay moved from 17000 to 17001. I see, at least for this fiscal year, no salary, and it doesn't go back to 20 or 19. And I know, and I'm just, so we're funding a position, we're consolidating two positions that don't exist to create a new position. And we've had a philosophical conversation about early childhood, Dr. Vidala, you and I think that that's something that I've certainly been hearing, and I think you agreed, that was going to become universal for over a decade, and I wish it would. I really wish it would, because I think that there's a tremendous value in early childhood education, and I think Ms. Carpenter mentioned at the last budget meeting that we, during the time of my tenure with Ms. Carpenter and Ms. Griffin Dunn, we did rent space to Head Start at the Welch because of the value that we saw in early childhood education. So I was just hoping to see what the budget line was for the early childhood coordinator that existed, or the preschool coordinator, I think is what it was. Not early childhood is what we call
Yeah,
it.
and I believe it's something that has been previously cut.
Yeah.
And so I know we really trimmed last year's budget significantly, and we're feeling the effects of that, you know, and you know, as we return, you know, the kids who have missed out on pre-K, you know, we really feel strongly that that's a much-needed position. It is a consolidation of two previously budgeted positions, not necessarily in FY '21, but previously they're in the Unit B contract, and they have been in the budget before. But we think this structure is going to serve our kids a lot better.
Yep, no, like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I was just trying to find the two positions we were consolidating, and I at least see that now, so I appreciate that. And that, I think, takes me to, I did have, I had a question regarding tab 10, line 10,006, and I think it's just perhaps a mistake. It looks like there's no funding, or there's no FTEs in that line. But it's,
That position was moved, the reading teacher?
yeah,
That position was moved to the ELA line
Yep.
2 years ago.
good, but it's showing just in the percentage change in the right-hand most column, 100%. So I think it's just a typo or a glitch.
In the book you received tonight, it's corrected.
Good, thank you. And then lastly, I think for me, for now at least, is something that we talked about last week, and that's, I guess, maybe a change in the way we're calculating. Well, there's a few things, but they all work off of the way we're now calculating the number of pupils per building. Because I hadn't seen this before. I hadn't seen pre-K pupils, although we know that they're in some of our buildings, calculated towards enrollment in Peabody. And the chart that we're getting, both in the big budget book and in the version 3 that we received tonight, and thank you guys for working so hard on all this, includes those students. And some of those students go to an integrated preschool that we, the Peabody Public School Department oversees, and the Peabody Public School Department pay the salaries for the staff members there, and supplies and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then there's this other program that's existed through tremendous work from a lot of people, Pasos Avantes, which is, as far as I can recall, always existed in the South Memorial School, and now has branched out, and thankfully, to the West Memorial School. But we didn't really oversee that program. It was kind of like this quasi-public, quasi-private, and it existed, and it had a great director, and unfortunately, she passed recently, and it's a huge loss for the city and for all of us. And but we're now putting those, particularly Pasos Avantes kids, in the count. And it has an impact on a bunch of stuff, including some of which is contractual, some of which is budgetary, and what Dr. Vidala is proposing in terms of adding assistant principals, even though in, I think, one of those schools, we're still not reaching the contractual threshold, and that's fine. We talked about what's appropriate, and we do what's right, not necessarily what's contractually obligated when we see things that we need to do. But we're now, again, bringing back a position, which I don't disagree with, that's worthwhile, and an early childhood coordinator, and two of the building, or actually only one of the buildings that we're putting the count in for preschool students is getting a new assistant principal. So I'm okay with one. I'm not crazy about both. I'm not necessarily, going to stand on my head, because it seems like we have funding from ESSER, and that's the rationale for doing some of this stuff and getting some of this back. I'm maybe a little more conservative and say, well, we just had a tremendous amount thrown at us over the last 14 or 15 months that nobody could have anticipated. And even though there's a big number that we're getting from ESSER 2 and 3, I don't know what tomorrow brings. And I might want to reserve a little on that. And that's about as much as I'm going to say about that. And again, it's not, philosophically, Doc, you and I had a nice conversation, and I agree. I just, I'm here for a reason. We're all here for a reason, and I felt that we should explain to the public what our thoughts and stuff are on that. And I know you're chomping to respond to me. I'm going to add just one more thing, and then I think I'll be done for a while. What the additions that we got tonight for the building access attendant, I get, we have a wonderful building access attendant here at the Higgins. She does a great job, and I miss seeing her when I come in this building, because she's always upbeat and bubbly and professional, but it's always a pleasure seeing her. This one seems to me like something I really don't want to support. I get that, Mr. Busey's asked for it, but along the lines of putting, and it's not a big number in the scheme of things, but keeping that in the bank, just to me seems, I don't know what the need is. We have one entry door, and she works hard when she's here. It was a position that I wasn't comfortable with when it was introduced, and I think it was Dr. Levine at the time introduced it, and I've learned the value of that position by being here more, and the security of it, and especially with the central office being a little recessed compared to where it was in the old Higgins. So I see the value in it. I don't know why we need to add, I think you said it was bilingual, or there was some rationale for that, but anyway, I think I've said a lot.
Thank you. And so if I may respond, I'll start at the beginning. In terms of counting the students, this budget counts all of our students the same way that if you go on the school and district profiles on the DESE website, they're counting all our students. So if you go on to the South School and district profile on the DESE website, pre-K students are counted. We're receiving some funding for them. And so we're making sure that we're reporting them appropriately, and that they're accounted for. So that is just a reflection of how DESE counts and how we count. I wouldn't draw the clean line from that to an early childhood director or to an assistant principal. I think that a building the size of the South, even K-5, well over 350 students, the needs of the kids, the increasing population, in order to support our kids, I think that that position is warranted. I don't think it's necessarily just because of pre-K students, and the change in that is honestly just a reflection of how DESE counts our kids. We're counting our kids in the budget. In terms of the building access attendant, it is something that, the high school is a large school with 1,500 kids and 4 building access attendants because of the number of night events they have. With this being a new school and more and more people want to rent our facilities and access our facilities, you'll notice when we walk in for our meeting, we don't have someone here. And so that was really the option to do that. If we're able to do that and address the linguistic needs of our students and our families, we also know that that person may be pulled from the door more often if there is a need, for a phone call and things like that. So not necessarily having two that overlap, but having two that are staggered would certainly help this school and increase the safety and security as well as how we meet our families. So that was something that was, asked for and recommended by Mr. Busey, and it was something that, based on some of the things that we had with the retirements and whatnot, we thought that we could, fit that within this number, and, I'm happy to listen to the committee on it, but it was something that had been asked for. I didn't put in the initial one, and then when we started moving our things around, we said, maybe we do have an opportunity to really increase that opportunity. And, maybe some of the attendance issues and relationships with families, just having another person to make phone calls and really do some of that outreach, could help.
Thank you, Dr. Vidala. I have a couple of things I want to go over. A lot of my colleagues had already addressed a lot of my concerns. On the counting of the preschool students, in the schools where we're counting them, do we also list the lines of each of their staff?
So the staff is funded out of various accounts. So, for example, Paso Cervantes is all paid out of the revolving account, so they're not in the appropriated budget. Many of our preschool teachers at the McCarthy are paid out of the special ed budget because it's an integrated one, so they're out of location 17. I do believe the Welch teacher, they have one teacher, I believe that's in their budget. I can look at that. But so they're paid out of a variety of different areas, but the students are there. So the location where we're paying them from is there, but the students are included in the count for the school.
Yeah, I was just kind of, looking, I'm fine with you including them in the count, and I think I addressed this before. I wouldn't approve adding an assistant principal based on that number, because contractually, we bargain that in a different way. But I am in favor of adding the full-time assistant principals where it's requested and needed. I think overall tonight, I think we heard a lot about the After Dark program, so I'm hoping that maybe we can discuss that in the future. The only change that has happened tonight is Mr. Amico's motion for the $5,000 change in legal services. We do have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow. I'd like to entertain from this committee if we are satisfied with this budget or if we should be meeting again tomorrow and get the feel of the committee on that and move directly to the public hearing for next week. Mr. Amico?
Sure, through the chair to the committee. Ms. Dunn said this last week, this is a great budget. Dr. Vidal and his team did a great job of putting this together. Sure, can we go through here and find a few items? Yeah, I think we did. But overall, I think I'm satisfied with this. I really am. And I want to go back to what I was saying. And what's great about this committee here, the six of us, the superintendent, when the chair is here as well, we often disagree on items. It could be small items, it could be large items. I mean, we really had it out pretty good this time last year and over the summer, and we were a house divided. I mean, it was, but what was great about it is, as we were walking out, once that meeting was over, there were no hard feelings. We were always cordial, and that's what I feel like tonight. I just feel like, sure, we should disagree a little bit with our superintendent, but man, he's done an incredible job. I mean, this is his first year. He's a rookie. I mean, and I hate to use that term, but this was imagine being in your first year as superintendent and you're coming in during a pandemic, and then you help take the school district that you were hired to be the first district to go fully in person, the largest district in the state. I'm going to say New England. Why not? No one's going to check it anyway, so I'll say New England. I mean, he's done an incredible job. So if we're going to give him a little bit of a hard time for this and that, he should take it, and he's good with it. He's tough. He comes from tough stock and a great pedigree. Gloucester-born, Revere. I mean, he was ready for this, and he's done an incredible job. Central office has done an incredible job, and I just think we've done a really great job this year. Our staff, our teachers, our kids. I mean, we asked a lot of our kids. Everyone's done a great job. I say we close this up. Let's finalize this budget, and let's move on to bigger and better and greater things. So moved.
Thank you for your very passionate speech about our awesome superintendent from Gloucester.
Ms. Carpenter, I just heard from the Baseball Writers Association, and I think Dr. Vidal is being named Rookie of the Year for mass school superintendents.
If there's one, he's got it.
Mr. Arnottis?
I'm prepared to move on as well. My question is, though, with that $5,000 reduction, do we want to reallocate that? Because I'd be fine making a motion and just split it, 2,500 to performing arts, 2,500 to athletic equipment, and cover it right there. And then we can figure out any additional costs that might come after that, but if we can make that move tonight, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Arnottis made a motion to split the $5,000 between athletics and performing arts. Mr. Amico seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mr. Amico?
Yes.
Ms. Carpenter?
Yes.
Ms. Griffin Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Onotis?
Yes.
Is it on the motion, Mr. Olympio? Or Mrs. Dunn was?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Mr.
Go
Even though I think we can wrap it up tonight, I just want to put it out there for your consideration. Should we have a meeting tomorrow night with the mayor for the final vote? That's the only reason that I bring that up.
We would have the final vote at the hearing, no?
Tonight's vote would be recess the meeting.
Yeah,
for the
You're
June
right.
hearing.
Yeah.
I take back what I said.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes, I'm also prepared to move on, but I would just say if, again, following back up on that contracted services, if it is just a mislabel, and for some strange reason, if it's something that we do not need, then potentially we have $40,000 that we could 20 and 20 allocate to other programs, so that's, yeah, I mean, if we need, if it's mislabeled and we need it, fine, but. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Amico?
And through the chair, Dr. Vidal, you could be a very popular person with our athletics and our personal arts, performing arts kids.
So our public hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, June 8th. That's at 6 o'clock, correct? Okay, I have that. So we will not be meeting tomorrow night, is that right? Okay. Entertain a motion to recess?
So, Ms. Carpenter, just so we're clear, on June 8th, we're going to take 3 votes, right? We're going to take a vote for the salary budget, we're going to take a vote for the non-salary budget, and a vote for the total budget.
Yep.
And then,
Do you have to vote for the ESSER? It'll be in the number.
no. And so, my memory is, and I could be, my memory's getting worse as I get older, is that we prepare the budget that's going to the public budget meeting based upon what we've approved. And I hear that we're approving what we have in front of us, but I thought that we took those votes prior.
My understanding was that we have an open budget hearing, and then we vote
Yeah.
after the public hearing,
No.
and we vote at the end.
Yeah.
And then that gets posted on our website and goes to the city council.
It's like a combination of Freddie Lynn and Dustin Pedroia. No question, Rookie of the Year.
Because there is a possibility at the public hearing for some changes to happen. So, and then, yeah. Motion to recess?
So moved.
Thank you.